Emily Elizabeth, and I'm the host of the What Fulfills You podcast, a show for and about individuals always seeking to be their best selves. On this show, we talk all about building the mindset, finding the right careers, creating meaningful relationships, and so much more. Welcome to the What Fulfills You podcast. Hello, friends. Welcome back to another episode of What Fulfills You. My name is Emily Elizabeth. I'm your host. And on today's episode, I am diving into a highly requested topic, which is around finding more like-minded friends, individuals, and environments to surround yourself in. And this is something I talked about when I recently spoke at my alma mater, Chapman University. And I noticed that one of the obstacles or mental blocks that a lot of people have around this is just how to put yourself out there or how to remove the fear, whether it might be because you don't want to let go of other friendships or because you don't want to, like feel bad because you are outgrowing certain people. And I have a few different thoughts on that. I think for starters, it's important to understand that as you evolve and grow in your adult life, which is bound to happen to most of us, it is normal to outgrow certain people, and it is also normal to still remain friends with people that you have outgrown, but perhaps it's a different dynamic. Maybe it's someone that you've been friends with for a long time and you've outgrown them in a way. It doesn't mean that that friendship has to end, but perhaps it might mean that you talk to them only periodically or that you don't spend as much time with them, right? I think it's learning how to compartmentalize different people in your life. My dad used to talk about this idea of like this three circles or like the three rings you have in your life. So you got like your inner circle, you got the middle ring, and the outer ring. And maybe your inner circle is like 3 to 4 people. The outer ring is maybe, or the middle ring is like maybe 5 to 7 people. And then the outer ring is a little bit more, right? So just kind of thinking of it that way. Maybe someone moves from your inner circle to your middle circle, or someone moves from your middle circle to your outer circle because of just the way you're evolving. And again, it's not something negative, but it's just understanding the way life flows and how it's also not personal. And I'm sure I'll do another episode on the topic of friendship falling outs or, friendships that didn't even have a falling out, but just faded and you don't talk to the person anymore. I've certainly experienced that several times in my life. And it's funny because it's something from a cultural standpoint, to my understanding, I think, I would hear from one of my parents when it came to like Vietnamese culture or the Asian culture, almost like it was shameful that you're no longer friends with certain people. And which is so different, as most of us know, if you're in, the US or just more westernized culture, you realize like that's actually a very natural part of life and that there is no shame around no longer being friends with certain people. So this is kind of my own little nugget to those who grew up with immigrant parents or maybe just super different culture. Like you're more westernized and maybe, your parents are like extremely a certain way and they find it hard to understand your world, your life, and just the way life has evolved in general, right? Like some people are still stuck in their older generation ways, and that's totally fine. But I do understand and can resonate with those who don't have that emotional understanding from parents or within the family. This is me sharing to you. I've been there, I have lived it, and I know that there are many of you who have messaged me on Instagram and have often told me about how helpful it is when I talk about that and when I address that. I certainly know that when I was, especially in my early 20s, navigating those major differences of having Asian parents and growing up in the US and with very American values, it was just so jarring in some ways that I didn't really understand it and come to peace with it until I spoke to other people that had the same exact obstacles and issues. And it made me feel more understood and like I'm not crazy. And just the fact that it is such a thing for those of us who are children of immigrant parents. And so That being said, just to wrap up that point, like, it is normal for friendships to fade, and there's nothing to be ashamed of, and oftentimes, nothing bad happened for these friendships to fade. It is just the cycle and the natural cycle of life, Some things live on forever, or actually, I should rather say not most things don't live on forever, right? But it is just kind of the natural ebbs and flows of life, and that's okay. So, why is finding more like-minded friends in a like-minded environment, why is that relevant? Well, I had an epiphany in 2017. So at this time, I was like 20 years old or 21. No, I was 20 years old at the time. And it was a time in my life where I didn't have the friendships that I have today. I didn't have the support system that I have today. And because I didn't have any of that, and I was so emotionally and mentally lonely, I came to realize that this was in part because I, number one, hadn't been taught how to make quality friends and how to choose them. And to be fair, I think it's great to learn this on your own because there is a difference in experiencing it firsthand rather than being told, you should choose friends who have these values because blah, blah, blah. Like, you're not going to understand it the same way until you experience it firsthand. And so, I went through that stage of my life where I became really mindful of the type of women that I wanted to allow into my sphere, my energy. And I went seeking that. I went seeking girls in college that were health driven, that were values driven, and really embodied all of that, and also lived in a similar way to the way I want to live and to the way that I do live. And so, what I've noticed is that when I was surrounding myself with people like that as early as college, it 100% impacted my trajectory and impacted where I am today because I know that if I was around other people in college that maybe had different habits or didn't elevate me in a way that made me want to be a better version of myself, I wouldn't have dreamed as big. I wouldn't have gone after the things that I wanted to do. And so obviously I'm in agreement with the fact that there's like a natural flow in life and you don't want to force things too much and you don't want to try, to do this or that too much. That being said, there is a sweet spot between letting things flow and enjoying the present, and also being really intentional with who you are choosing to surround yourself with. So, for example, if you know deep down that you want to be more healthy and actually live a more health focused lifestyle, and that involves less drinking and no smoking or whatever those habits you have that you definitely want to cut out, but your friend circle or most of your close friends kind of partake in that, maybe that's one area you can look at for where you can pivot, right? For me, if I were in that position, I would be looking for more friends that embody a more health-driven lifestyle. They probably go to that Pilates class or that Barry's class or whatever at 7 or 8 AM. Like they're definitely going to be there and less likely to be found doing the habits that you're trying to get out of. And I'll say that when I look at my friendships and when I've made big pivotal changes, and I actually wrote this down. I remember how it pivoted my life and how that changed my life. I think the most significant was around 2020 and 2021, where I started to have more entrepreneurial friends. These were mostly guy friends, actually, but two of them were like some of my best guy friends. And one of them, Ronnie, he actually was on the podcast before. And I think that right there pivoted me to live this more fulfilling and dream big life. And why I say that is because a few reasons. My friend Ronnie at the time, he was already living and embodying an entrepreneurial life and had already done well in his business. So he was kind of like, a couple years ahead of me in his career and his business acumen and actually making a sustainable income as an entrepreneur and running an agency. And so for me, when I decided that I wanted to eventually start my own marketing agency, it didn't feel impossible or weird to say, especially around my entrepreneur friends, because they were all already doing it in their own way. Like one friend had a big e-commerce business that he ended up selling. Ronnie as well, he had a different business, but also had an exit as well. So I have all these friends that were making a lot of money, right? And they were doing the things that enabled me to see, okay, this is a reality that is possible. So that's something really important to take note of is just like when I go back to skating or tennis, one of the reasons why I was able to get to a high level is because I was training in arenas or tennis centers where people were eventually going to play at Division 1 schools, or the people I was training with, they went on to compete actually at the Olympics or like compete for Team USA. So I was a few degrees away, or just 1 degree away rather, from the best of the best, right? And so to me, when you are surrounded by that every single day, you're naturally going to start to believe it as possible and as a potential reality. Whereas I'll give a basic example. I'm from a small town in Pennsylvania, and I grew up in a town of literally 4,000 people. It's not even an exaggeration. That's what Google says. And so for me, I know that the life and the way people live in New York City, especially the people that have families here and can afford to have families, that is so far-fetched for the people that grew up in my hometown. You know, the amount of income it takes, the lifestyle, like the mindset, everything is so different, right? That naturally I would never think someone could think it's possible if they're from my part of Pennsylvania. They would be like, "You're crazy." Again, when you make that move physically, when I moved to New York or when I moved to Los Angeles, that's when I was around even more people that could reiterate the possibility of that dream being a reality and that the dream wasn't far-fetched. And so I think that's really important when you are surrounding yourself with people, especially women, when it comes to like-minded friends. So this is me speaking to my gals out there. Find people that are either a little bit ahead of you or kind of like where you're at right now, and they are also hungry to do more, to live more. And I'm not saying like that they're like never content with what they have. I'm just talking about the fact that you know you can expand more in your life. You know you can take more out of your life. You know you can be more present. You can enjoy every moment more. And there are some friends that just are not on the same wavelength, and being around them can actually just hurt your trajectory a little bit. So I think it's important to find these types of people. Obviously, beyond entrepreneurship, I also later on, especially this year recently in 2025, I later on found even more supportive and like-minded women. Um, Most of them actually came from Instagram DMs, if I'm being really honest. One of them was introduced to me over Instagram DMs, but everyone else was like either I messaged them or vice versa. And it's not like I go out of my way looking for it, but I think what happens is that when I see an opportunity or when I see a potential, oh, like this person seems to be my vibe, or oh, this person also played college tennis, like let me reach out to them, right? It's kind of just taking that opportunity and running with it and seeing where it goes. I'm not going into it with this attachment of, oh, I want to be friends with this type of person because I'm looking to be surrounded by XYZ person, right? Like I simply just look at opportunities. I see the window of opportunity and I take it. I just don't hesitate. And ironically, one of my friends that I met this year who was introduced to me over Instagram DMs, the friend that introduced us, I actually came up to her. I think I talked about this on my podcast before, but I came up to this girl who's our mutual friend who is a Pilates instructor. And it was because I recognized her from like 15 or 12 years ago when we were both training at Delaware in skating. So I would have been like 14 and she would have been, I think, maybe like 18 or something. And, you know, so I was younger, but I just remember thinking like, "Oh my gosh, like I think I recognize you." And then it was through my initiative of coming up to her and then talking to her when I was in Miami. She later on was like, "You guys would be a great fit. Like, you guys should connect." And so you just, again, when you put yourself out there, when you put that energy out there of curiosity and openness, it just somehow comes back to you. And that's why it does start with you. But again, keep in mind that all of this that I'm talking about, it's just a accumulation over the years of all the people I've met, all the people that had a lot in common with me, or, again, there's a lot of people that didn't, and, they're not in my inner circle today, but that's okay. You don't need a bunch of people in your life. You need quality people that are going to be there for you. They're going to be supportive, that share similar values, that are also, in my case, I look for open-mindedness, I look for growth-mindedness, I look for fun and playful, because I think also at the same time you want people that can balance you, right? So I think it's having that self-awareness of how you are naturally. For me, I am entrepreneurial and very business oriented, but I'm also extremely playful, like in a childish way. And I think that for me, I'm kind of right dab in the middle, where I can very much get along with someone that's more serious and more business minded. And I can also very much get along with someone that's super playful and kind of a little rowdy. And, it can go both ways. So I think it's really fun to have that, at least for myself, but to understand, okay, what types of people would complement these aspects of who I am. Something else to keep in mind, especially as I alluded to earlier, environment also plays a big role. And so I'm going to admit that it probably would be harder for me to find the type of people that I'm looking for in certain places, maybe like a smaller city or a smaller town. I'm sure there's, someone there, but it's just going to be a lot more rare, right? Because someone like myself who enjoys New York or Paris or London or these big metropolitan cities where things are more challenging and things are a little bit faster and things are a bit more expansive, it does require someone that enjoys an element of that, right? And so naturally, someone that doesn't enjoy that is probably not going to be in the city that I live in, And so I think that's something I always intuitively knew since I was really young, was that growing up in the small town that I lived in Pennsylvania, I felt really limited to not only what I wanted to do in my life, but to the types of people I felt like I was kind of missing in terms of friends and just people I would normally hang out with. And so when I moved to Southern California, that was a big step for me, because I really met a lot of different people and different ways of thinking and different ways of being. And that expanded my world so much. And I came to understand people in a different way. And I think that also made me more courageous and more adamant about, okay, I think I'm going to go to New York next, like, because it's always been in the back of my mind. But I think I really needed LA and Southern California first. Like, I needed that chapter first because it was always a dream of mine to live out there. And it's still an amazing place, a place that I could 1000% imagine still living in. But, at this point in my life, and at least for the foreseeable future, I love being in a metropolitan city like New York. And there's just so many different legends that have come from a city like this. And so it's something I would encourage you to think about if you are on the fence about moving to that city or making a move because you wouldn't have the same types of friends or you wouldn't have community yet. You got to remember that you are the person that creates the limits. So your limiting beliefs and whatever you feel like is possible or is not possible, you are the one that creates that, right? And so if you are in a small town right now, or even if you're in California right now and you're like, oh, I really want to move to New York, what's holding you back, right? And also, a different way to frame it is, what about that environment draws me? Why do I feel intuitively called to it? I can personally say I know a city like New York is going to draw and attract go-getters and people that dream big and people that love the expansive feeling and love culture and art and music and restaurants and like just that lifestyle, right? And again, there's people like, I have several friends from my small hometown, like that's just not their lifestyle. Like that's not something that they want or that they've never felt drawn to that, and that's okay. Right? So this is kind of me nudging those who feel like they are currently in an environment that just doesn't suit them, but you don't know how to get out. The decision is just up to you. And remember that you can always go back to where you started. You can always move back. Nothing is ever a permanent decision. But I do believe that the sooner you get out of your comfort zone, the easier it gets, because I got out of my comfort zone more or less when I was 18, and I continued to go through the different ebbs and flows of getting out of my comfort zone, from going through a breakup in college, from moving out of an apartment with my then boyfriend, to transferring universities, to starting at the new university with no friends, to trying to make new friends, like all of it, right? So obviously, I can speak about this now in retrospect and acknowledge how impactful it was to change environments and to also be intentional with surrounding myself with like-minded people and friends. And outside of friends, it's not just like your friends and the people that you call and hang out with, but even the people that influence you are the people that you listen to, the podcasts that you listen to, the books that you read, the TV that you watch, whatever that may be. You have to be really aware of, is this feeding my mind the things that I want and need? Or is it actually draining me? Or is it actually dragging me down? And it really just comes down to that. It really just comes down to being super intentional and finally putting your foot on the ground and saying, okay, this is enough. I want better for myself, and I know I am capable, and I'm going to start today. I hope this episode was helpful, gave you some insights and tips, and maybe inspired you a bit to finally make whatever change you need for yourself. I am here for you guys and rooting for you all in your own pursuit for a more fulfilling, grounded, and intentional life. As always, if you enjoy this podcast, it would mean a lot if you could share this episode with a friend and rate and review the podcast on Apple or Spotify. It literally just takes 5 seconds. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I will chat with you all in the next episode.